How's it going, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? Adrian here for Digital Dojos, and we're talking Apple, and specifically a lot of the latest devices they've launched and what they're calling their kind of Air Week. Some of these products were announced, most of these were announced this week, if not today, but some of these came earlier in the year around this time frame, so all kind of in that same, month or 2 week lifespan. But Apple has quietly released a good amount of products and new hardware to kind of kick off the kind of Q1 going into Q2 of 2025, and the typical kind of Apple refresh. But backed by no event, just general announcements that were dropped mostly on like social media and like Tim Cook's Twitter. And it starts with Apple's iPhone lineup. The iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, which have been out for now coming up on over a year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. This was the whole Apple iPhone that kind of kicked off the built for Apple AI or Apple Intelligence, so to speak. Offered some new, design upgrades, the new camera button, which I still don't really use, or shutter control, whatever they're calling it. But they've introduced the iPhone 16e into this lineup. And it makes sense. Again, offering this kind of more consumer friendly in terms of price, while skipping on the features not every user may need, to offer a more entry-level device for the average consumer here. And you notice this a lot across the kind of price points and hardware that they announced in this week. But the 16e, latest iPhone, greatest price. Essentially, it's the cheapest iPhone is the way they're putting it, at least in the 16 lineup. And it allows you to kind of offer that iPhone 16e, 16, 16 Pro. So for like the consumer who might be considering getting like an iPhone 15, for example, may now just consider getting the 16e at this point, right? A 15 base model at $699 costs more than the baseline 16e, which starts at $599. And this is that similar design aesthetic to the 16 lineup. It's powered by, I believe, is this on the A16 or A18 Bionic chip here in this one? A18 chip. So A18 chip powering the phone here, and then you can kind of see how it compares against performance here. Notably, you'll notice they only let you compare it up to the SE or 12 mini. And maybe that's because it's more in line with the consumer who may be geared towards this. You're not obviously going to this if you're on an iPhone 16, obviously. You're not going to go downgrade. But even if you're on a 15, you're probably not considering the iPhone 16e, right? So this is for people who don't often upgrade, who aren't, trying to spend thousands of dollars on a phone. It gives them a more cost-effective option. I think for people who upgrade, very infrequently, every 4 or 5 years, this may be a really good option. You don't need all the bells and whistles. I think about people like my parents, for example, who may be a couple generations behind but want to upgrade. The 16e gives a good option for those who don't need, again, all the fancy stuff. This is still touting the whole Apple Intelligence possibilities. I personally still think they missed the boat on this, and it's still nowhere near what it needs to be for how much they're playing it across all of their devices, the whole built for Apple Intelligence. But the 16e is out, and it's a entry level into the flagship phone that is iPhone. Speaking of some other Apple products that were announced and built for Apple Intelligence, as they clearly label all across here. First announcement earlier this week was around iPads. And notably the iPad, the baseline model, and then the iPad Air. At this point, there has been so many naming conventions with iPads and stuff that they've just reverted to using the standard name and refreshing it every couple of years, rather than following a numerical kind of naming scheme. So this is the baseline iPad. Entry-level iPad, if you don't want to get an iPad mini, starting at $349, comes in these 4 kind of classic colors. Supports a lot of the standard Magic Keyboard, Apple Pencil. All that stuff is now supported on a lot of these base models, so that's nice. You don't have to just get the Pro, for example, or the Air. But this is a really great entry level if you just want to get an iPad for yourself. You don't have a tablet. Maybe a tablet is your form of computer. And nowadays we're getting closer and closer to that. These things are getting more and more powerful, where people can quite literally just use this and do use this as their main computer. I know Apple did a whole ad about that. This is powered by the A16 chip, so still a couple of generations behind. But for the most part, if you're looking for an entry-level iPad, this is what Apple's going to be offering, and will be available for pre-order later here in the month. But the kind of mid model here, the kind of middle ground is the iPad Air. Again, similar to the 16e, of the 16e, 16, and the 16 Pro. They're giving you those 3-tier options and the latter option, so you can kind of upgrade either way or downgrade. And the iPad Air is that. It's the middle tier iPad, not counting like the iPad minis, which you're probably getting if you want a very specific form factor. This is powered by the M series processor, specifically the M3. So it is going to be packing a punch. This thing is going to have really great performance. Coming in at $599 baseline, so $600. Similar, can support all the famous accessories that you might want, like the Apple Pencil and the chips. It's going to offer a whole new kind of color scheme and ways here to kind of help delineate it amidst the other iPads. And it comes in 2 sizes. So notably, you can get an 11-inch model or a 13-inch model. So you have options in terms of what screen size you may be looking for. So for some people who are considering a mini, an iPad Air 11-inch might be a good middle ground without being too big and kind of entering like the Pro territory. But yeah, the iPad Air, very powerful. Again, the middle ground iPad with a lot of packing as 2 times the power of the M1 chip that was previously in the iPad Air. And again, as they quote say, built for Apple Intelligence. But end of the day, to me, at least at the moment, that does not mean much. Let's go back here to look at today's announcement, which was the MacBook Air. I think, honestly, this is one of the more exciting ones. This lineup has been getting only better and better in terms of its value, and with the M processors, I think the Airs have kind of entered a place where, for a lot of people, myself included, a personal machine. On a work machine, I have an M1 MacBook Pro that I still use. I also have an M2 Air that I have as a personal device here at home. And these processors are so powerful and have only gotten better and better over time since Apple has moved to Apple Silicon, that I think the Airs are one of the best, not only entry-level Macs you can get, just one of the best Mac, period. In terms of laptops, a lot of people who are even power users like myself don't necessarily always need a Pro, where an Air nowadays could suffice for a lot of reasons. So it's packing that 18-hour battery life and the latest and greatest M4 chip. And again, the whole Apple Intelligence, but you've heard enough of my sentiments around that. This is all while offering 2 screen form factors. So I know a lot of people who like the Air felt like an 11-inch or even a 13-inch was too small of a screen size, and Apple, in this case, is now offering it in 13 and 15. I know they've done it on some previous models. So now you really have the option if you want something that's light and compact, but at the same time still a big screen because that matters to you. Maybe you're not hooking it up to a monitor or what have you. Then you have a 15-inch display option. So super thin, super light, but also super powerful. And that's not something, even years ago back, you could always say about the Air. There was compromise, right? Whether it was the cooling or the performance, it was a trade-off for the, lightness and compactness of it. But now at a baseline price for the 13-inch for $999 with an M4 processor, 8-core GPU, 16 gigs of unified memory. Granted, your biggest limitation here is the storage, but nowadays, if you're using cloud storage and other things, this is a really, really great deal, in my opinion. And if you upgrade for just a little bit more, you can get a faster GPU, or you can upgrade your storage. If you want the 15-inch, it's starting at $1,200. Still arguably one of the best deals in my opinion, not just in Macs, but computing in general. I think these M chips and these M series of chips, specifically with Apple Silicon, are such a good deal. And if I wasn't considering upgrading my MacBook Pro right now to a M4 series Pro, I'd perhaps consider an Air right now, but no need for 2 M4 series computers, at least right now when it comes to laptops for me. But arguably, again, one of the better deals in Macs right now overall. I recently purchased the latest Mac Mini that Apple came out with, which I still think to this day is one of the best computing deals you can get. But I understand that not everybody is a desktop user or wants that, to have to get the screen and the accessories. I think next to that is the MacBook Air, at least in the current lineup. And then a more quiet announcement that also was announced today and will be available starting the 12th as well is the Mac Studio. The Mac Studio finally got the bump it deserved, especially following the Mac Mini announcement. The Mac Mini was such a great deal, and with the the latest M series chips, was so powerful that it kind of dwarfed the Mac Studio, which was like 5x its size. I actually have a Mac Studio right now mounted under my desk that I used to use at the office, and it was running the M1 series chip. But with this latest update, it's brought it to the M4 and M3 series chips. I believe previously the most recent model was on the M2 series, if I'm not mistaken. The Mac Studio is a desktop Mac that is built for the creative in mind, whether you're doing music or audio or video editing. This is meant to be that powerful desktop in a more compact form factor. I say that, but now you can argue the Mac Mini can do that as well. But now with the Studio packing these new processors, the M4 Max and the M3 Ultra, it's taken a huge leap in terms of performance while also offering you all the I/O that the Mac Studio does that the Mac Mini doesn't quite offer just yet. Now, the only thing I will note about this Mac Studio announcement is these CPU options. M3 Ultra, M4 Max. Again, it's a naming convention thing here, and while they've simplified a lot of other lines, and Apple's known for simplification, you're always in this space where their most current generation of series of chips, so in this case the M4, will always compete with the previous generation chips, the M3. They'll offer the M3 in the previous models or the base models, and they usually will have two kind of chips going on at the same time on average, right? Obviously, you have the A-series chip in some of their older devices, but what they did here with the Mac Studio is they've offered the M4 Max and the M3 Ultra, and in my opinion, just from a pure marketing standpoint, and as somebody who understands tech and is into the scene, this is confusing. What's essentially better? Outright, of course, you would say the M4 Max, because it's newer, is the Max version, but the M3 Ultra packs a punch here too, and if you're just looking at numbers to numbers, 512 is bigger than 128, and this number is bigger than this number, and these numbers are bigger than these numbers, right? It's confusing to the eye if I'm looking into it, all pun intended, apples to apples. And while you can compare it here with some other models in the lineup, it doesn't tell you much. Again, it'll show you these kind of numbers, but in terms of like raw performance, it's still kind of confusing. And I think from what I've seen, at least the discourse online, a lot of people are actually going with the M3 Ultra model here because if I'm not mistaken, you save a little bit too. Let's see here. So M4 Max, 2,000, M3 Ultra, 4,000. So I was wrong in the savings department, but you're getting quite literally double the power. So you are getting a 60-core GPU versus a 32-core, and a 28-core CPU versus a 14-core. But again, it's confusing because M4 is newer, but this is like the top of the line M3. Like, I just think this is a real error in naming conventions because essentially the price is higher on this one, so you're going to assume, and rightfully so, that this is better in certain aspects, and it is. But yeah, you can really spec these out, and you have the choice here. And I guess this is probably the best indicator. If you're looking at this, you'll see the price here. But you can only choose. You can see here if you're looking at the M3 model versus the M4 model, you're choosing between chips within that line. Oh, actually, sorry, I apologize. If you're in the M4, you can see multiple chips here. So here's where it kind of gets confusing, right? M4 Max here, M4 Max with 16 core plus 300. But if I want to go to the M3 Ultra, it's plus 2,000, right? So in my opinion, confusing. I think Apple should have done a better job here in kind of how they approach this. But I understand. It's just like this weird cycle of CPUs and model names that they're in. But as somebody like Apple, I feel like this was kind of an oversight. If I'm confused, I imagine a lot of people are confused. But maybe because the average user who's buying this is not that. They're not the average user. An average user is not getting a Mac Studio, for example. But it is a nice welcomed update to see these get the spec bump that it deserved, given that the Mac Mini was such a good deal while still being super powerful. Again, right now I run my M1 Mac Studio as my main Mac here in the home office and studio, but maybe that'll be changing since the Mac Mini that I got is used at my other office as my daily driver there. Who knows? This new M4 Mac or M3 Ultra Mac Studio may be my future purchase. Again, built for Apple Intelligence, if that means anything to you. So that was a look at Apple's announcements today in the lineup over the last couple of weeks. Overall consensus on these things, obviously it's a nice refresh to kind of kick off 2025 and kind of queue up all of these product upgrades and cycles with the new M4 chips. If you're looking for a great deal on a MacBook right now, you're a student, go MacBook Air. In my opinion, that's probably going to be your best bang for your buck if you can survive all those ports and the kind of trade-offs there. I think it's a really, really great computer that's going to suit most people's needs. If you need a little bit more power, you need the ports, you are doing more heavier duty workloads for specific tasks, then yeah, the MacBook Pro is going to be your better option. If you're looking for a solid iPad right now, you have a lot more options on the spectrum, whether it's the iPad mini, the iPad Air, or the iPad Pro. That's really going to come down to your personal preference and maybe even your budget. If it comes to a desktop Mac right now, the best deal, in my opinion, is still that Mac Mini. The Mac Mini is just a solid deal for its price point. And if you're looking for a Mac, you have the monitor, you have the accessories, Mac Mini all the way. Mac Studio, on the other hand, is going to be more for a specific use case and a specific user. And last but not least, when it comes to the iPhone, you now have the 16E as an option for that entry-level model if you're not looking to spend, $700, $800 plus on an iPhone right now, but you still want the greatest and latest in the iPhone lineup. Hope that helps summarize it. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching.